the Surgeon General, a three-peat New York Times best-selling author and religious study professor, and the Duke men's basketball coach walk into a bar. I love jokes, but for this one, I don't have the punchline. I can only imagine the scene if this was real. Other customers in the bar, moving their chairs closer, cranking their heads to get a better look at this party of three leaders, influencers, icons, maybe engaging half-heartedly at their own tables while lending an ear for all of us. This isn't a joke or an imaginary situation. Tonight, I welcome you to stare, to come closer, to absorb, to participate, and take in each word and thought, process it, consider it, store it away, maybe share it immediately. Nah, this isn't a joke. It's an honor and a treat, and it should be fun. My name is Chris Simmons, and I'm the Vice President for Government Relations here at Duke. And on behalf of the university, President Vincent Price, and this event's co-sponsor, the Office of Student Affairs, and Vice President and Vice Provost Mary Pat McMahon, I welcome you to Page Auditorium. As the parent of two college students and another on his way very soon, I'm grateful for the Surgeon General's focus and concern about the mental health of college students. Duke is the first university, the first stop on Dr. Murthy's national We Are Made to Connect tour. Tonight, he, along with Kate and John, will share stories and observations about their own experiences and remind us that relationships with one another can be a source of healing that can help us all live healthier, fuller, and more productive lives. And there's a lot going on in the world right now. We acknowledge it. You only have to walk across our campus or look at your phone to feel some of that hurt and turmoil. As a university, we appreciate and support differences of opinion, the importance of free expression. We also value civility, respect, care for each other, and hold each other to those standards this evening and every day. In that vein, on topic for tonight, and thinking about our world, I urge you to consider how we can be kinder to others and to ourselves, how we celebrate each other, how we show and demonstrate grace. Tonight, you should expect to be challenged, entertained, maybe even moved. Perhaps let yourself be more open. What can we do to connect and be connected, to support and ask for support? As Professor Buller says, and I'm sure she'll remind us tonight, you're loved. Life is absurd, and it is so hard to be human. So we return to that scene. A doctor, a professor, and a coach walk onto a stage. Please join me in welcoming the 19th and 21st U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and my friends and Duke colleagues, Kate Bowler and John Scheyer.
I'm so happy. You guys, it's two of my very favorite people, and I'm forcing them to be friends in public for the very first time. You guys, thank you so much for being here. These are people who think so deeply about the social fabric that weaves us together or the things that keep us apart. So I am really excited about this conversation and thought maybe we could start out with, you know, the Surgeon General, because those are words that I use frequently. You have a really weird job. Yes. You are America's doctor, and you spent a lot of time traveling the country really thinking about what ails Americans, and you started noticing something even before the pandemic, loneliness, and I wondered if we could start there.
Absolutely. Well, let me just say I'm so excited to be here at Duke with Kate, and I made her a promise that you know, whenever I get together with Kate, She always makes me laugh, like uncontrollably, so I'm going to try to control it, keep it in today. But I'm thrilled to be here because I've actually had the chance to come to Duke at a number of points in my life when I was thinking about where to go to medical school, when I was at various points in between. And to be able to come back now, to be able to engage on a topic that is profoundly meaningful to me, and I hope also resonates with you, which is the topic of loneliness and social connection, is a special privilege. But if you had told me that we would be here talking about loneliness, if you told me that 7, 8 years ago, I would have said, I think you're probably off. But what happened to me along the way was that during my first stint as Surgeon General, I began by traveling around the country and talking to people, and asking them, how can I be helpful? And I was trying to just listen to what their stories were. And I heard a lot of stories that you might expect. People who were concerned about the addiction crisis in their community, folks who were worried about rising rates of depression and anxiety that they were seeing among young people. But I also started to hear these stories about loneliness. I heard from young students who were on college campuses who would say, I'm surrounded by hundreds of other kids here, but I don't know, I feel like nobody really knows me for who I am. I feel like I can't be myself. I heard the same from parents who were busy, surrounded, by their day-to-day lives by so many people, but just felt profoundly alone.
Yeah.
I would talk to members of Congress and I would hear the same thing, that they were feeling lonely. I would talk to CEOs, they were feeling lonely too. And that's what really led me to dig into this and to recognize that not only is loneliness extraordinarily common, with 1 in 2 adults in America struggling with loneliness, and the numbers are actually much higher among young people, but it was also really consequential for our health. That when we struggled with that sense of social disconnection, it turns out it increased our risk for depression, anxiety, and suicide, but also for physical illness, for heart disease, for dementia, and for premature death. So all of those came together to really motivate me to say, you know what, loneliness is actually a public health issue. It's not just a bad feeling, and it's one that we've got to address with great urgency.
Wow. I guess it's funny too that we're sitting here with Coach Scheyer, because I want to play this song that's like, all I do is win, win, win every time he walks into a room, which I think is a common feeling around a friend. But I think one of the kind of special things about this conversation is that though you've shown, tremendous resilience, like you always know how to get back up, but you've had seasons in your life where you really got knocked down, especially with like a life-altering injury. I wondered if you could talk a bit about what that season was like for you, and whether, like, the kind of, what the emotional world was like when you kind of found you weren't exactly winning.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's an honor to be here with both of you tonight, Dr. Murthy, Kate,
Dr. Buller, Dr. Buller.
Vivek, okay.
I promised that I would call him
Look,
Coach Scheyer if I worked in Dr.
back,
Buller
okay.
all the time.
In the back, Kate said, listen, you better be calling us doctor, professor, like that's what you're calling us tonight.
I'm not ordained, but maybe Reverend Doctor. Yeah.
And, we're not going to talk about your choice for medical school, by the way. In fact, you didn't choose Duke, but it is an honor. And,
I'm not sure I got in.
I have a feeling you did, if I had to guess. But, it's such an important topic. You mentioned the injury that I had. And, when I left Duke, we won the national championship, and was really proud of the career that I had here. Even though there were some people that were happy about the upgrade at point guard with the guy Kyrie Irving coming in. All right? I didn't feel too bad. I saw that one day and I said, who's this Kyrie guy? And anyway, I don't take as much offense to that anymore. But I was playing Summer League with Miami Heat, and first game right before the first game that I played, that's when LeBron James came out and said, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. Okay, Chris Bosh said he's signing with Miami. Dwayne Wade re-signed with them, and I go from finishing up at Duke to thinking I'm going to be teammates with LeBron, win 5 championships, and they need minimum contract guys. I'm that. Like, I fit that category. They need shooting. I fit. In the first game of Summer League, I hit the game-winning shot. The second game, I got poked in the eye, had an optic nerve injury, and lost all my vision immediately in my right eye. And so as my team's playing the rest of Summer League, I flew back to Chicago, saw a specialist who told me he probably wouldn't be able to play the game again that I love. And then the next week, I'm in the hospital having steroids pumped into me, trying to get the swelling down, instead of thinking that I'm going to be teammates with LeBron James. And there was a defining moment in my life. It's a very lonely moment, but the thing that kept it together me was the amazing support that I had from my family, the amazing support I had from my Duke family. You know, there's a guy, Terry Kim, who's a great doctor here at Duke, and he's an amazing eye doctor, and Terry was on me every step of the way. Coach K, every step of the way. A couple of my close teammates calling, checking in every day. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know what I would have been feeling at that time. But looking in the key moments, and that's one for me in my life, how people show up is important.
Yeah.
How people show up when when it's not winning a championship. A lot of people showed up for that. That was great. But here I am a few months later, not signed to play anywhere. I don't know what's going to happen. And those people in my life that showed up made a huge difference.
Yeah. Do you think you would have had a hard time, like if you hadn't been bubbled, like it sounds like they like rushed in. When you feel like things are bottoming out, like what kind of obstacles do you think people feel when they're not really sure if people want to hear from them, or like, especially if they're telling the same hard story like the 18th time, where you're like, no, I still have this horrible problem. My life is still hard.
You know, I find this a lot with some of our players or some different experiences that I've gone through, where you end up really internalizing so much, right? And you know, one of the things that I felt when I've been in those moments, I think everybody in this audience, I'm sure, has felt lonely at some time. Yeah. And you end up, the moments I felt the best is when I end up reaching out to people, and where you get outside of your bubble somehow. And sometimes that can be harder. There's, like, I want to talk about some of our players, what I think they go through as well at some point tonight, but they may not give you the response you're hoping for, and but the message is being delivered. And so for me in those moments, I'm not sure I was outwardly as thankful as I should have been, right? But that changed my life. And I think that's an important thing, is just for all of us doing the right thing in those moments when it's not easy to do it. Yeah. And it literally can change somebody's life.
It's so nice too when people like get their kind of personality. Like there's the person who sends the text, like that beautiful. Was it the beautiful doctor who even like remembers when your injury was? So
literally, Terry Kim. I got injured in 2010, July 13th. I wake up to a text every July 13th from two people, my mom and Terry Kim. And that's an amazing thing on his part. Like that means a lot. Yeah. And it's something because of that. Some of our guys have had important dates or injuries or surgeries, and I've passed it on. Like that's something I've learned from Terry, and I know how it makes me feel, so I know how it can make somebody else feel. Yeah.
I have friends who do that where and if they know that they're going to forget, they even like put it in the calendar for later. Like if someone goes through a divorce or someone has some kind of thing they just weren't sure that they could get through, when they're like, all right, I'll just use Outlook to remind myself that somewhere in the future I will want to know that I was changed. I know that this is really close to your heart, Dr. Murthy, that like we're in a really weird position where we're not entirely sure how to reach out together. I mean, it's obvious that this is so important to you if you wanted to come to the world's greatest university on the first stop of your tour, but why is this such a passion project for you right now, and especially with young people?
Well, I think it's very personal for me, as I know it is for so many of us. I've had my own struggles with loneliness that I didn't talk about for many years because I had a sense of shame around that. When I was a kid growing up, a lot of times I would actually fake a stomach ache so that I wouldn't have to go to school. And I still have not told my mother this, and she doesn't come to any of my talks, and thankfully she doesn't know this.
I'll text her directly after.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for looking out for me.
For your usefulness.
But the reason is not because I was scared about like teachers or exams. I was actually scared about going to school and walking into that cafeteria one more time and not knowing who I could sit next to, or walking out onto the playground and not being sure if there was anybody who'd want to play with me. I had a hard time as a shy, introverted kid making friends, even though I wanted to. And I never talked about it because I was ashamed. Even though my parents loved me, I never discussed it. Yeah. And I looked around me at my classmates, and it seemed like everyone was doing great. It seemed like everyone had it all figured out. Yeah. They had all had their sets of friends, that they were perfectly happy. I realize now, having talked to some of those classmates, that that was a real illusion, right? Like, we've become so good at putting masks on and making it seem like everything is okay, whether those are our digital masks and in terms of how we portray ourselves on social media, or whether that's even just how we interact in real life. And so a lot of times it seems like we're the only ones struggling, but it turns out others are too. And for me, that was the case. So I've also, like at later points in my life as an adult, I've also struggled with that sense of loneliness. One of the, I think, deepest bouts of loneliness I felt was actually after my first stint as Surgeon General, when I ended up leaving my government service. It was fairly abrupt, like my departure. And I had made a critical mistake, like during my first term, which is that I had sort of convinced myself, oh, this is once in a lifetime opportunity. Actually, I didn't realize it would be twice in a lifetime. But I thought, once in a lifetime opportunity, I should do everything I can to make as much of an impact as I can, as much contribution as I can. And with that argument, I ended up neglecting a lot of my relationships, right? And
because you were like, you're like in a go for gold, sprint, sprint, sprint.
yeah, so like when friends would call, I'd be like, I'll just call them back later when things are less busy. A less busy day never quite came, right? And so months went by. Even when I was with my kids, with my family at the dinner table, I'd be distracted. I'd be like, checking emails, checking news, making sure I was up on top of stuff. And I would tell myself, oh, I need to do this as part of work. I don't want to get behind, et cetera. Anyway, there are all these stories we tell ourselves, to rationalize why we do what we do. But those are the stories I was telling myself. But the consequence of that was that when my time in government ended, suddenly I was left without the work community that I had. And I felt estranged from the other relationships that had sustained me for years earlier in life. And it was my wife, Alice, who finally one day said to me, when she noticed just how much I was struggling in those days afterward, she said, part of your challenge is you don't have a community anymore. Like, you have to rebuild a community. And I struggled for a while with how to do that. And I felt a sense of embarrassment, honestly, at reaching back out to some of those friends who I had neglected for a while.
You might know me from such things as I've been the Surgeon General.
Well, also, it was like I felt bad to ask them to like be there for me when I hadn't exactly been there for them over the last couple of years, right? And so I finally was having a breakfast with one friend in Boston, and she said to me, Vivek, you know what your problem is? She said, your problem is not that you don't have friends. It's that you're not experiencing friendship. There are actually people in your life who, if you call them up today, they would be more than happy to be there for you, to reconnect, because the love they had for you 5 years ago is still there, even if you haven't experienced it. So what you've got to do is experience the latent friendships that exist in your life, but don't walk around thinking you don't have people that care about you. And that was a very powerful thing for me to hear. And ever since that conversation, I've actually shared this story, from time to time with audiences, because I think in all of our lives, I suspect if we pause and think about it, there's somebody we can think of who does deeply care for us. Maybe we haven't talked to them in a few years. Maybe we had a disagreement with them some time ago and it's been awkward since. But we know deep inside that they care for us, that if there was an emergency, they would show up for us. And if they were in a crisis, we would want to show up for them too.
Yeah. I think that is the Everything Happens project. We get a lot of mail. And I think that is one of the hardest bits of mail we get from people is when we say, interdependence is the only way that we can sustain ourselves during difficult times. And then they're like, great, actually, but I don't have somebody. And I like that you're it's also could be like an excavation project, it sounds like. We've been many people over the course of our lives, and it sounds like maybe reaching backwards sometimes.
Yes, I think the chapters that we've lived earlier in life, those don't become sealed off from us entirely. We can go back to high school friends and middle school friends and people from earlier versions of our life.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if we even despite that, if we feel like there's not somebody that we have in our life, another thing that I found is really powerful is that we can forge bonds with people by looking for ways to serve the folks around us. And this is something that I came to realize over time that I didn't know before, which is that service turns out to be one of the most powerful antidotes to loneliness. When we see a colleague who might be struggling and we reach out to help them, we've got a teammate who's having a tough day, and we just stop by at the end of practice or at the end of the day to check in on them and see how they're doing. When we've got a neighbor who we see struggling in their yard, or somebody in your dorm who you realize is, it might be having a rough time, and you just, again, stop by to check on them and see how they're doing.
Yeah.
Those small moments are the glue that bring us together as human beings. I think sometimes, thanks to Hollywood and Bollywood and all of the sort of fantasies that we draw in movies and in books, we think that it's the grand gestures that create connection. But it turns out that it's in the small acts of kindness that we actually forge deep bonds. And not only do we feel connection when we serve other people, but we remind ourselves of something that we can easily forget when we struggle with loneliness, which is that we have worth, that we have value to bring to the world. Because that's something that we lose. Like, loneliness over time can erode your self-esteem and your sense of self. You can start to feel like, hey, you can feel the way I did when I was in elementary school, that, hey, I'm lonely because I'm not likable or I'm not lovable. Yeah. And it's a terrible feeling to have that makes it actually harder to reach out. But service can actually short circuit that downward spiral and forge really powerful, beautiful connections.
That's so lovely. Like, that's so lovely. I was one of those kids who really struggled with friendships, and I remember sitting on the bus being like, I just wish I knew what other people were thinking, because then I would know how to connect. Oh, wow. But I love that you're saying we'll just find a way to be useful. Honestly, it's one of the things. So John is a killer friend. Like, he has a talent for friendship, and I think that's because he's very good at kind of instead of talking about him, he'll isolate something about someone else that's really lovely. And I kind of, because this is my chance to ask you personal questions in public, I kind of wondered if that was maybe a skill you developed early on when you were trying to figure out how to bring people together. Because I read somewhere that you insert words about basketball, blah, blah team, blah, blah captain. Maybe?
Yeah, you're close.
Championship,
championship.
Exactly.
Ball,
moment.
defense,
Yeah, that's right.
rebound.
Moment of importance. But you wrote all these lovely letters to your whole team about not about this is all the great stuff in general, but the letter was about them. These are the things you're good at. These are your gifts. And I thought, what? Because you were an adolescent boy at the time.
I was.
But I kind of just wondered, how did you figure that out, and how has that served you?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It was, I wanted to win very badly, and I was willing to do whatever it took. But I also knew the importance of everybody on the team, and I think that's something I've learned more and more as I've gone on as a player and as a coach in my life. Having empathy is important, right? It's hard being the best player, needing to score 20 points a game and 10 rebounds. It's also hard being the guy that's trying to fit in and earn playing time. It's important to connect and have empathy for each situation. So on our high school team, we had 15 kids, and our school had never won a state championship before. And so I just wanted them to understand how much I cared, but also how much I believed in each one of them. So instead of just writing a letter to one of them, I decided to write a personal letter to each player.
Was it handwritten, you were at your cute little desk with a train car side?
I was still at my cute little desk typing it. I typed it. I wasn't, but each one, personal note to each guy. And even a couple of years ago, one of my teammates and friends still has a letter somehow.
Wow.
And after reading it, I said, man, my grammar is just not good.
You be good player, love. Love, John.
I can't believe it. I came a long way my senior year of high school to get into Duke, but it was a little concerning to me after reading it back. But that was a moment I'll never forget, just the connection. Can I say, I don't want to go off topic, but I just want to add what Vivek was saying, because I feel the same way at times right now. Like with the job, I don't have a 9-to-5 job. It's an amazing thing. We recruit, our players have stuff going on. But what I found is the challenge of being present is the most difficult one for me personally. I think it's also the most difficult one for our players. Like now with phones, how often you're easily accessible, right? There's always news going on. And so for me, I have 3 young kids, and it's still something I'm fighting with and working through and want to be better at it. But just giving them is better quality over quantity, right? Just if you're doing both, if you're checking work, if you're checking, kind of with them, one, they know it. That's the thing I've learned about kids, and they feel if you're not fully with them. But then two, you're not really doing this either. And being present as we're getting ready for this talk tonight, I just kept coming back to that, how important that is.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not like
No,
throwing
I
a
like
curveball
that.
to you or
No,
all of a
but like
sudden.
sounds like seeing and being seen is also just like the intensity and like the quality and the wholeheartedness that you can give to other people. It's like, but you're you're both very emotionally responsive people. I love that I got the chance to meet one of your best friends, Sonny, who's great, who's very proud of you, that we're here tonight having this conversation. I may have texted him, but I wondered, like, it sounds like this next go round that you wanted to undo some of the worries of like maybe not being present or maybe not keeping up with your relationships. And you adopted like a really lovely practice. So I wondered if you could tell me about your moai and what that is.
Oh, sure. So thanks, Kate. This came about in 2018 when I was about 1.5 years removed from serving government, still struggling to figure out how to rebuild a community. And I was at this fellowship retreat in Colorado Springs at this place that had like a big lake or a pond in the center. And these 2 buddies of mine, Sonny and another friend, Dave, were there as well. And we blew off a couple of the sessions and decided to just take a walk together around the pond. And as we did that, it felt really good. We were old friends reconnecting. And we realized that all 3 of us were actually feeling a little bit lost and a little bit lonely at that time in our lives. We were trying to figure out work stuff, trying to figure out other life stuff, and we were feeling somewhat disconnected from people. And at the end, I remember us saying, well, we should get together more often. But how many times do you say that with friends?
Yeah.
And then it never really happens, right? Like, I'm just curious, I just want to show you hands, how many people here have said, we should get together more often, and then it just never, ever happens, right? So almost everyone, we've said that. So this was a moment where we said that, and it immediately felt wrong. It was like,
felt what?
It felt wrong. It was like, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, something's got to be different.
And you're like, we should end this now. And then you all walked away in different parts of the pond, and one person canoed out, and that was it.
No, but that would have been very
It would be a
interesting,
tragic
though.
ending, but still poignant, I think.
Yeah, still poignant. What we did at the end is we said, what? We're going to make an explicit commitment to actually be there for one another.
Yeah.
And here's what it's going to look like. And we modeled it off of the Okinawan concept of a moai. The Okinawan concept is it's old, and it's based on this notion that when kids are young, the parents would bring like a group of 6, 7, 8 of them together and say, okay, from here on going forward, you all are a moai. That means you have each other's backs. You'll always be there for each other, no matter what. If somebody runs into financial trouble, you all help out. Somebody runs into health problems, you all help out. Whatever the issue is, you have each other's backs. And so we decided to build our own moai, to make our implicit friendship explicit. And we did that by committing once a month to video conferencing. And during that time, we decided that we were going to focus on each other. We weren't going to be distracted by our phones. We were just going to talk to each other. We also decided that during that time, we were going to talk about what really mattered to us. That yes, we would have fun. We would joke around as we always did. But we talk about the stuff that friends don't often talk about openly enough. Our health, our finances, our family, our fears. And the last thing we decided is that in between those monthly calls, that if something came up that we wanted to celebrate or a real challenge that we were facing, that we would just reach out to the moai. We would text the group, and if we needed to, we'd pull together an emergency call. And when I was on the way from my house to the airport this morning to come down here to Raleigh, actually I had a call with both of them, like in the car, because something had come up for one of the group members, and we wanted to actually talk it through. So that's what we decided to do. And I'll tell you that, you know, I loved these two guys before, I love them now. But it's different having this explicit commitment with them, where we now show up for one another regularly, consistently, and major decisions in my life about work, about family, about health have been impacted by the conversations I've had with this Moai. So in many ways, I feel like they changed the course of my life these last few years.
Aw. Can you force people into your Moai? Like if I was like really interested in John having direct say about my life, could this be something we do together?
I don't know that you can involuntarily draft people, but
You could if it were done in public and under the right circumstances. But I guess, I mean, one of the things it sounds like too is that with that kind of reciprocity, you can build a level of emotional vulnerability, like almost like increase your threshold for emotional vulnerability. But it also sounds like it requires more honesty and feedback than other relationships typically tolerate.
It does, but I mean, like, hey, look, just curious, how many people feel like you've ever gotten tired of just like trying to put on facades and like, you know, meet whatever standard society has set for you and be somebody that you're not? Just out of curiosity, how many people have felt that way? Like, I felt that way, you know, almost all of us, right? So while it can be hard to be vulnerable and open at times, in the end, it's actually much easier to just be real, right? To be able to be real, to be in a relationship where you feel like, oh, I don't have to be anyone else, I can just like be myself. And I think we actually all need that in our lives. That doesn't mean that we all need like 1,000 friends, right? If you just have 1 or 2 friends with whom you can be totally yourselves and you can be vulnerable and open and you can go to them in a crisis, you can go to them when you have something to celebrate, that could be all you need. But one thing I worry about is that we're living in a time where like quantity of friends has somehow superseded quality of friendship.
Because we have a literal number.
Because we have a literal
that
number.
tells us.
Yeah.
I thought I had 20, and it turns out I'm supposed to have, and then you can see it go up and down.
That's right, yeah, and I would have more if Kate friended me on social media. No, just kidding. But, I'm just kidding. But the point is, like, to Kate's point, like, social media actually pushed so many people to quantitate their relationships. Right, and be like, oh, and I still remember, like, in the early days of, you know, when I was on social media, people would be like, oh, I have this many friends now, I have that many friends now, et cetera. Even the word friend, I think got sort of misappropriated, used for an entirely different, we were talking about people who you happen to have an electronic acquaintanceship with.
Are aware of.
Or aware
I am
of, yes.
aware of these people.
And sometimes people you're not even aware of. Sometimes you're like, who's that person again? How did I meet them? But it's really the quality.
Why are you liking my vacation photos?
Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's right. So, you know, I think that was actually very powerful, not only because it moved us from quality to quantity in some ways, but I think it also shifted the nature of our interaction with friends, right? So I still remember when, on my birthday, people would text me. And then at some point, they started leaving messages for me on social media, like on my public wall. And they were like, happy birthday, I'm so glad, blah, 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 blah. And then the next year, there was happy birthday. And then eventually it was HBD. And I was like, wait, what? Like, how did this get to like HBD? Like, but there's been this like, but if you just write HBD on like post after post after post, you can wish a lot of people happy birthday. But you know what? It doesn't feel the same as when you actually get a heartfelt message from someone, or they write you a card, or they leave you a voicemail, or something like that. And that's why in some ways I almost feel like if we want to get back to the roots of like truly satisfying relationships, of the essence of them, we have to remember that like we like evolved over thousands of years to process not just like the content of your speech, but the tone of your voice, your body language, the expression on your face, the nuance, what was said but also was not said. And that's why like now, like this is gonna make me like sound super old, but I know that there are some of you who don't know what voicemail is because you don't use it. And I've been called like, you know, an old fogey for even mentioning voicemail. But I actually think that voicemail is very powerful because I had a friend who I used to play phone tag with a lot. And what he would do is he would just leave me messages when we couldn't connect. He'd be like, hey, his name is Mark. He'd be like, hey, you know, I was doing this today, I was doing that, I'm super excited about this. This thing happened to work, I'm a little worried about it. Excited to catch up with you about it when we talk. But just like hearing his voice for a minute, wow, that like made a difference. It also has made me pick up the phone more now when people call, even if it's just to say, hey, I'm about to walk into this conversation with John and with Kate, can I call you back later?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you that even that 5 seconds of hearing someone's voice and them hearing yours makes you feel different, makes you feel more connected than if you were to just silence a call, maybe text them back and say, I'll call them in a few days, like when I have time. So I do think that it's the quality of our relationships that we have to get back to prioritizing, to investing in, and not worry so much about the quality of connections that we have. I'll ask you to tell you, I was in Colorado recently, when we were together recently.
Yeah.
So before our lunch, when we were together in Colorado, I had this dinner before, the night before, with a group of folks, including a young woman who had just graduated from college. And she told me a very interesting thing. She said, you know what? She's like, when I was 12 or 13, she said, my parents and I decided that I was not going to open any social media accounts. I was like, wow, that's very unusual. You know, like 95% of young people are on social media today, or of adolescents, I should say. And I said, well, what was that like for you? Like, wasn't everyone else on social media around you? She was like, yeah, almost everyone else was. She was like, it was hard in the beginning because I was like, how come I'm the only one who's not on it? People are checking stuff. I don't know what they're checking. She's like, but I'll tell you this. She's like, I now look back at the last few years. She's like, and I'm so grateful to my parents because she's like, I don't have a lot of the anxieties that my friends have. And I have a small circle of friends, but they're really good friends. She's like, we're there for each other. We take care of each other. I say this to all of you, not to say that if you got on social media, you made like a grave mistake and there's no coming back from it. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that I think it's worth interrogating and examining just the role that technology and social media in particular have in our lives, and specifically in our relationships. And that it's important, I think, more so than ever, to draw boundaries around certain areas in our life that are worth protecting, and those include our time in person with other people. So, and I thought John's point on this was spot on. But like, we've all probably been in circumstances where we were talking to somebody else and you could tell they were distracted, that they were doing something else. They were on their phone, or they were like texting on their computer, or there's something else, like while they were talking to you or Zooming with you. And it doesn't feel great, and we know when that happens. But to have the ability to just focus in on somebody and to put your device aside, to make your in-person time tech-free time, it's a small but incredibly powerful shift that you can make in your life, which will enrich the time that you have with people, and it'll make them feel a lot better because they'll know that they have one of the greatest gifts you can ever give them, which is your full attention.
Man, I think that's so true about like this death by weak ties feeling that we all get, and like how do you restore that sort of the fullness of who we can be if we actually are fully present. And it reminded me of something you said the other day, John, about like one way, like if only we had an expert on how to build strong ties, like a team, if you will, a team to beat all teams. Pause for grandeur. Like one of your hallmarks is honesty, and you're really good at facilitating communication that isn't just compliments. I prefer a compliments only strategy, but like this is a big part of who you are and how you build connection. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like how do you kind of increase people's ability to be honest with each other, and what have you noticed about that dynamic?
Well, one, I'm going to sound a little old here, but it is different as our teams have gone on. You know, when I came in 2006, you know, we were on our phones. You didn't have picture phones, or you're not taking pictures or anything like that. Now, so much of our players' communication happens. They're snapping, they're texting, like maybe FaceTime for 1 second, but they're not doing video calls, or they're not on the phone for long periods of time. And so one of the things we have to talk about confronting often, and confronting isn't just negative stuff, it's anything in the moment. And you know, we actually, what day is it today? My days are, Wednesday? Is there Wednesday today? I think it's Wednesday,
Yeah.
okay.
I had to think for a moment too.
Yeah, thank you. But on Monday, we actually had a values meeting. And
What's a values meeting?
so values is basically the standards we're going to live by. Like, what are the values we believe in? Where gives our team identity. You know, we have, you know, like I've learned from Coach K, we don't have, our rule is to show up on time. You know, but the values is something not only that I'm instilling in our players, but they are speaking on what they believe in as well. But I told them there's really two things for me. And the first one I mentioned is trust.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different vehicles that can break up trust now. You know, especially for a college athlete, when you think about the space that they're in, there's pressure from friends, from family, from us as coaches. There's expectations for immediate success. There's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's any form of social media. And trust is not just given, it's earned. But to me, the only way to get that is by being honest all the time.
Yeah.
And so we actually had a coach come on staff, Emmanuel Dildy, this summer, and we had meetings at the end of the summer that were very honest about things that were really good that they needed to continue to do. And there were also things that our players needed to do a lot better. And we just laid it out there for him. And Emmanuel was kind of taken aback. He's been coaching now for almost 20 years. He said, wow, we can really be honest here? Like, we can really do that? And was rejuvenated by it because, to me, it's the, you know, look, a lot of coaches, they're worried about losing players to the transfer portal or what could happen if if it doesn't go very well. But for us, you know, like, I'm proud we haven't had a player transfer in this past spring. We actually haven't even brought a transfer in this year, which is rare for right now in college basketball, but it's all built on telling the truth. And the special part is our guys now are getting to the point where they're telling each other the truth in real time. You know, they're confronting each other. Hey, Cal, I need you now. Or Tyrese, pick it up. Or you're doing great. Like, any of those comments, and what a saying we've had in our program for a long time, learned this from Coach K, but is to get outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And the more you're encouraging and talking to others, the better you become. Mm-hmm. And I felt it as a player. I feel it as a coach all the time because you're talking to everybody else. But it's something that I think is key for any young person, but also especially our players and a young athlete.
Yeah. I like that there's a cost to being known, is that people will know us for the things we're amazing at, and then people will also know us in our faults. And to me, that's been one of the great gifts of learning how to be a good friend and to be in relationship with others is, like, by myself, I was only ever going to be so, the foundation was only ever going to be so wide, and this building, whatever this is, was only going to get so tall. But it has been people coming alongside me and being like, hey, no one likes it when you're late. No one. Or, like, I grew up with a habit of, like, devastating but hilarious comments, which I hoped would endear me to others. It did not. And it was like the first friends who were like, hey, by the way, like, this is never going to work. And I love that you're, like, teaching people the grittiness of those kind of connections, and that we can be, that we can be more when we let people see all of us. I did ask this wonderful community, I canvassed for questions for you two, each spicier than the last. So we have some student questions and some Duke community questions, and I wondered, would you guys be up for, it's not rapid fire, I promise. I promise. I know this is a high pressure situation for John. This is like, so much is happening for you right now emotionally. Okay, this is a student question. And we talked a little bit about it. Student question, all right, social media. That's it, social media, I like this. I go between feeling totally immersed in other people's lives online and then feeling like I have nothing to do this weekend. I always end up feeling like something's wrong with me. Coach Scheyer, do you want to start us off with, like, you've lived two kind of different lives. One as this authority figure, and then the other as a student in this. Do you think this is getting much harder than when you were a student?
No question. Yeah. No question. I feel for our students right now, and how rampant social media is. And, look, for me, I'll confide in all of you, before we played one game last year, I got off of Twitter.
Yeah.
I got off it. I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not reading. I'm not, and it's probably the best decision I've ever made. Like I have, the first week, a lot of news is on there. It's part of, my job, so I had to find a different way to get that news. But part of me, I kept going to the app, and then I forgot I deleted it.
Yeah.
And the first couple weeks here was tough. By the time, like right now, I will never go back on it. Just will never go back on it. And, I think the biggest thing, I go back to being present. I think I've learned over time too, and Vivek, I'm sure this is your world, you could speak on this even better. But a lot of what you see isn't real.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a lot of what you see isn't real. And it's a snapshot or it's a sliver of, an entire day or complete. Look, somebody could have a bad time at a concert and you see the one moment of where they're dancing and doing this and you think it's the best time ever. Well, that person may want to be at home watching a movie or, it's not real. And so all I can tell you is I have empathy for whoever asked that question.
Yeah.
Like it's not easy, but I also know the less I'm on, the better that I feel. Yeah. That's just me personally. I don't know what you would say to that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you, John. I actually had personally a very similar experience. I had to have surgery on my hand earlier this year, and my two Moai brothers, Sonny and Dave, called me 2 days before the surgery, and they said, we know you're going to be taken half days for the 2 days after the surgery, half days at work, so it's going to be a good time for you to make a change or reset in your life. What do you want to reset? I was like, huh.
Oh my gosh, that's so thoughtful.
Yeah, it's very thoughtful. I was like, huh. And we kind of came to this conclusion that they knew that, I was checking social media here and there, and it was like, I got to do it for my job, I got to do it here, there, whatever. But it was always like, it never left me feeling great, It always felt somewhat draining, and also it took up a lot of time, and so they said, well, why don't you do something related to that? So I said, okay, I'm going to just stop checking all the apps. I'm going to delete them. I'm not going to look at them anymore. And I'll tell you, I was a little twitchy for the first few days.
Yeah.
But I actually started to feel better and better and better. You know what it was like? It was like the noise settled. I was actually able to focus on the stuff I cared about.
Yeah.
I was able to actually think about who I wanted to be. I was able to actually read more. I felt like I could pay attention to a book for longer. So that was good for me. But I'll tell you that just more broadly, I think I do feel for college students now and for grad students whose lives are, in many cases immersed in social media. And look, I've often found when I talk to college students and high school students that they've a remarkable amount of insight into how social media is making them feel. A lot of them, there are three common things that young people tell me about social media. They say it often makes them feel worse about themselves. They find themselves constantly comparing themselves to other people's lives, their accomplishments, their looks. The second thing is they tell me sometimes it makes them feel worse about their friendships when they see other people doing stuff that seems fun and exciting, but without them.
Yeah.
But the third thing they say is they can't get off it.
Totally.
And I don't think it's because somehow this generation of people have been born with dramatically less willpower than prior generations. That's not what's going on. What's happening is that these products are designed to maximize how much time we spend on them, because that's what the revenue model is based on, right? And so if the goal is to maximize how much time you spend, then I want to make sure I'm engaging you with content that's stoking fear, that's stoking anxiety, and stoking conflict. Because those three things, from an evolutionary perspective, draw our attention, right? So it's not that we're bad or broken or not disciplined. It's that in some ways we're the victims of what the apps are trying to do, right? Which is manipulate us to spend more time on them. So it's for those reasons that I think it's so important for us, if we're on social media, to figure out how we draw the right boundaries around it, right? Now, that could be like what John and I did, which is to say, you know what, we're actually just not going to use it. It could be dramatically reducing your utilization and saying, okay, there are only specific times in the day or in the week when I'm going to use it. It might be saying, here are the specific purposes I'm going to use it for. If I'm going to post something, I'm not necessarily going to check comments. You got to figure out what's best for you. The last thing I'll tell you is that making any of these changes alone is hard. Like if I didn't have Sonny and Dave and my Moai checking on me and be like, hey, are you staying off of them? Or are you still checking? What are you doing? I probably would have easily crept back in, right? But change is hard individually. Change together is much more feasible. And so if you have a couple of other friends who are also struggling with the same, if you form a pact with them and say, okay, what if all 3 or 4 or 5 of us decided that we're going to take a Sabbath here from social media, or we decided that we're only going to check it once a week, for an hour, or we're only going to use it in whatever way you prescribe, it will be a lot easier to do. And I guarantee you that there are other people, like classmates of yours, who are struggling with social media, who are saying what people say on surveys all the time, which is around 50% of people are saying that social media is making them feel worse about their body image. A third of people are saying that they're staying up well past midnight on weeknights, using social media and digital media more broadly, and that's taking away from sleep, which we know is essential, like for your mental health as well as for your overall function. So people are struggling. You're not alone if you are, and making a pact with others to try to make a shift around our social media usage could be one of the most powerful things we do to not only free up time, but to improve the quality of time and the quality of interaction we have.
But someone should issue a Surgeon General warning. Who would
So I'm glad you mentioned this.
Who would that person be? This wasn't.
Well, so a few months ago, we actually...
I like that you didn't even bring it up, even though you totally did it. I think it's insane. Like, this is a really big shift in how we talk about it, like, because there's an official, now, like, it feels validated in a way it never was before.
Yeah, it was in May of this year, as Kate's referring to, is that we issued the very first Surgeon General's advisory on social media and youth mental health, calling out the fact that, and really warning people that there are serious negative effects here. And just to tell you 1 or 2 of them, we found that when adolescents are spending 3 hours on social media a day or more, they experience a doubling in their risk of anxiety and depression symptoms. And the average amount that adolescents are spending each day today is 3.5 hours.
Wow.
So it's more than that, right? I mentioned earlier that half of adolescents are saying that using social media makes them feel worse about their body image. But so many are also saying that they're exposed to hate speech, that they're exposed, 6 out of 10 adolescent girls say they've been approached by strangers on social media in ways that have made them feel uncomfortable. So and then of course there's what it's taking away from. What I worry about most are protecting 3 areas in our lives, especially for adolescents and for college students, which is your time sleeping, your time in person with friends, and your time sleeping, in person, and your time learning as well. Because those 3 are really vital. And our attention, like, if you're like me, you feel like your attention got left somewhere in the dust 10 years ago, and it's hard to focus, right?
Yeah.
So many people say they feel that way these days. It's just harder to focus, harder to read a book, etc. I don't think it's an accident that people are saying that. And when you imagine if our phones are buzzing, if we're getting social media alerts all the time when we're trying to study or do something, you're just not focused. And you think, I'm just looking at that and I'm back focusing it. It often can take you up to 20 minutes plus to regain your focus once you lose it. And you lose it very quickly, when you turn to look at a screen or to check your inbox. So all that just to say that we issued the advisory, that warning, if you will, because for the last 20 years, we've essentially had the unfettered spread and use of social media, not just in the United States, but across the world, with very little study and as to the adverse effects, with very little guardrails and safety standards enforced. But when I was growing up, we had a huge issue with motor vehicle accidents in the United States. Motor vehicle fatalities were really, really high. Now, you know what we didn't do in that situation? We didn't say, you know what, this is just the price of modernity.
Yeah.
Cars are here to stay. We're not going back to horses and buggies. We just got to tolerate all these deaths. We didn't say that.
Yeah.
We said, we're not going to go back to horses and buggies, but we're going to sure as heck commit to making cars safer. And so we established safety standards that got us seatbelts and airbags and crash testing and a host of other safety measures. We need the same thing with social media. We need the kind of safety measures put in place and actually enforced that make it safer, not just for young people, but for everyone.
Yeah.
And right now, the entire burden of managing this is falling on young people and on their parents, right? The parents, most of your parents didn't grow up with social media, and it's rapidly evolving. And what we've fundamentally done, I think, is pit the best product designers in the world who are making these platforms and increasing in a sense, their addictiveness against young people and their parents.
Yeah.
And that is literally the definition of an unfair fight. And so that's why we issued that advisory where we called for policy action to finally have the backs of parents and young people, and what we'll continue to push for the kind of safety standards that we desperately need.
My suggestion also was that there's like a companion app that I can download, so when I click on Instagram, a photo of you emerges. It's just like, or just like a gentle
Now we're talking.
which I would
Now we're
take.
talking.
Like, I want to look into this face and feel lightly chastised, but also supported. You know what I mean? Okay, I think we have time quick for maybe one more question. Okay, I like this one. This is from, okay, how about this one? This is from a Duke community member. I already feel connected to everyone. Too many people to care about, too many problems to solve, but it feels strangely isolating. How do I know if my connections are going to sustain me in the long run? What do you guys think? When you think about your highest quality relationships, what do you think it is about them that makes you think these are the ones that will go the distance?
Well, I would just say the relationships that have lasted for me are the ones that have been there, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the ones that are there when, one, they don't need anything, they don't want anything from you, they just want.
They might not even know anything about basketball.
Well,
but they
yes,
still want to be
there's
your
some,
friend.
you know, somebody over here, and it's, look, Kate and I have had a friendship for, what, a couple years now, I forget what it's been, and she doesn't know much. I'm a little disappointed with my teaching with her, and I told her if there's any questions I don't like, I'm gonna start quizzing her on basketball. But the thing is, like I'll just use some of the moments in my life in the past year of games that we've won, get a big recruit, there's ACC championship, and like the support in all those moments are great. And I'll just speak about her for a second. You mentioned about not just sending text messages or HBD for happy birthday. We had 2 heartbreaking losses last year, and I woke up the next morning to a video message from her. Wow. And just pouring positivity into me, and just, hey, believe in you, you got this, make some funny jokes that puts a smile on your face, and the impact that has is incredible. And so I don't know if you already told her that you should, I don't know if you guys talked ahead of time and said she should be doing that, but
We did not.
naturally, that's such a special thing. And the relationships in my life have lasted because my true friends, the close ones, they're there whether we win or lose. They're there whether it's a great moment or not for me. And I would hope they would say the same, that I'm there for them in that way. So again, thank you, by the way. No,
And this
seriously,
was all
thank you.
a public effort so that I could receive that from you, and that's really nice. I guess, like, I think that's why I was honestly really excited about the two of you meeting too, is that you're both people who really like have this very, like, an intense emotional responsiveness to what makes other people connect. And it's been so lovely talking with you. And I hear, Dr. Murthy, that you have a challenge for us that I am not responsible for explaining. And I'm excited about hearing about it.
I do. Let me tell you guys about it. So, and I just love this conversation, by the way. I just want to thank you so much, Kate, and thank you, John, and thank Duke and all of the wonderful people who made today possible. This is the first stop on our college tour, and tomorrow we'll be heading to UVA. We've got a number of other schools coming up after that, and we're incredibly excited about it. But it's very special for me to be able to begin this tour here. And part of what we're actually doing as part of this tour is issuing a challenge to all of the students that we meet, and faculty and staff as well, everyone who's here, which is we're calling our 5 for 5 challenge. And this is where we're challenging everyone to take 5 actions over the next 5 days that will help you connect with someone else. And you can do that through 3 ways: by expressing gratitude to someone, by extending support to someone, or by asking for help. So if you do one of those 3 things each day for the next 5 days, you can mix and match them how you want. You can call someone and express your gratitude to them. You can stop by their dorm room, and if you know that they've been having a hard time, and extend some support. Or you could reach out to a friend or a family member and ask them for help. But those acts done over 5 days, we believe will actually leave you feeling better off 5 days later, more connected, and reminded of the connections that you may have had in your life. Who, like me, you may have had these friends, but not been experiencing friendship. This is a way for you to actually change that. So that's our 5 for 5 challenge. And today's the first day of it. And we're going to do the first one together right now.
Exciting.
So for all of you, I'm imagining most people probably have a phone on you. If you take your phone out,
I like how counterintuitive that feeling is. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
guys, it's horrible, but take it out.
Take it out, because this is about how we use tech for good, okay? And we're going to do that right now. So you take your phone out, and we're going to all take an action today that focuses on expressing gratitude. So before you do anything with your phone, I just want you to close your eyes for a moment and think about someone who has done something for you, said something to you that made you feel grateful. Maybe you were having a rough time and he just happened to pop in and check on you. Maybe you were not quite sure if you were on the right path and they stopped in with a reassuring word. Maybe you were really disappointed that something didn't work out for you. And they stopped in to remind you that it didn't matter if it did or didn't, that you were going to be fine, and that you had everything that you needed to be fulfilled and successful. Whatever it was, however big or small, think about that person that you're grateful to. And think about what you would say to them. If you had to write a 2 or 3 line message to them, tell them you're thinking about them and that you remember something they did and how grateful you still are. Think about what those 2 or 3 lines are. And now take your phone, and I want you to actually pull that person up in your phone. You could email or text them, either one. But we're just going to all take 60 seconds here and just compose that text or that email to that person right now and send it. So I'm going to pause, and I'll tell you when 60 seconds is up.
That's awesome. I need my phone so I can talk.
Another 20 seconds. And as you're wrapping up, I want you to, after you finish sending that text or that email, turn the flashlight on your phone and just hold it up so we can see the light. Ah, beautiful. So many points of light. I want you to just turn your head and look around at all those points of light around you. And think about the hundreds of lights that are shining right now. Each of these represents a connection that has gone out into the world. Somebody's going to receive that message. They're going to be surprised and grateful that you remembered them. Hopefully they'll feel inspired to reach out to more people as well. And that's the power of what we can do. Those are the ripples that we put forward into the world when we do something as small as spend 60 seconds and express our gratitude to someone else. We left for each of you on your chairs these postcards as well, where you can write down for each of the 5 days how you connected to someone and how that connection made you feel. And after you finish those 5 days, I just want to encourage each of you to share your experience with us and let us know how you felt. You can post, actually, if you want to use, again, social media for a purpose that makes you feel good, you could share that on social. You could tag 3 friends on social and ask them to take the challenge with you. Because remember, a part of our goal here is to figure out over time, how do we use technology to strengthen ourselves, to strengthen our connections to one another? Technology, at the end of the day, is neither good nor bad. It's how we use it. It's how it's designed that ultimately impacts whether it helps or hurts us. So let's use it in a way that actually helps us. And finally, look, I just want to say this as we close today. You know, what we've been talking about is a subject that's not only near and dear to my heart personally, but one that I feel is at the heart of what we've got to address if we truly want to build a healthier society. When we are disconnected from one another, when we are feeling lonely and isolated, as so many people are today, it's not only bad for our health, but it makes it hard to show up in our communities, hard to show up in our schools, in our workplaces. It makes it hard for us as a country to come together in the face of adversity, whether it's a pandemic or economic threats or threats from the outside. But when we are connected to one another, when we're in a community of people who we know have our backs, and we have theirs as well, then we can take on any kind of adversity, because we know we're not alone. And that's the importance of building social connection right now, of rebuilding a sense of community. It's why, in my mind, building connection is just as important as any subject you may learn in school, as any skill you may gain in the workplace, because it is a life skill. It's a backbone and the scaffolding on which we build everything else. And finally, just this. You know, I know that the world around us is like often telling us about all the reasons that we're not enough, right? We see people who look like, you know, they work out every day and they eat incredibly healthy and they have perfect bodies and who've got incredible GPAs and who've got resumes to die for and who are working fancy jobs and getting all kinds of accolades. And sometimes it can be easy to look at all of that, especially as it comes streaming to you on your feeds, and to feel like, gosh, I'm just not measuring up. I'm just not going to have what it takes to succeed. And that pressure feeds into the hustle culture that ultimately leads so many of us to feel inadequate. But I want you for a moment to think about this. There is a gift that each person in this room has, that you came into this world with and developed over time. It's not on your resume. It's not on your LinkedIn profile. It's nowhere on any formal record. But it's something that you do that makes people laugh or smile or makes people's lives better around you. I want you to think about what that is for a moment. Maybe it's your willingness to be kind to others. Maybe you're the one who happens to notice when someone's feeling left out or struggling, when other people may overlook it. Maybe it's your creativity. Maybe it's your laughter. Maybe it's your ability to make other people laugh. Think for a moment about what that gift is that you have, that other people notice, that you may have forgotten at times, but it's who you are. And I want you to remember that gift, not just today, but tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Because what is going to make your life fulfilling, what's going to make you look back in 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, when you're toward the end of your time, and you're going to look back and say, this was a good life. It's going to be determined by whether or not you use those gifts, whether you recognize their value. Because I'll tell you that having had the privilege of sitting at the bedside with patients at the end of their lives, having had the great honor of holding their hands and listening to their stories and their final reflections on their life, I'll tell you what none of them talked about. They didn't talk about how many followers they had on social. They didn't talk about what their GPA was in college. They didn't talk about whether they got that fancy internship or the big job or how big their corner office was or how much money was in their bank account. What they talked about at the end of the day were their relationships, the people they loved, the people who loved them, people who broke their heart, people they wish they had spent more time with. All of us, and millions more who are not in this room, want to build a world where we feel more connected to one another, where we know we belong, where we know we have each other's backs. And so even though sometimes we may feel alone in wanting that, I want you to know here today that we are part of this invisible movement of people who are already starting to take action in their lives, to reach out to neighbors, to reconnect with friends, to help others in their workplaces and their schools who might be having a hard time. That is an invisible movement of possibility, of hope, of human connection. And it's one that if we build it, we can ultimately create that connected world in which we can all thrive, and which future generations will be able to say, yes, this is a place where I have community, where I know my worth, and where I belong as well. So thank you all so much for being here today.